Newton such a
genius.
in such a in the I think mathematically they told me one time I've seen there's been 115 billion people roughly that have lived on the earth. And of that 115 billion,
Are you sure that's a number? That sounds a lot very high. We only have 7 now.
I think in the history of the earth, I think I'll pull up the stat for you, but I think it's 115 billion people they figure.
Sure, in reality, it's only 10 million. No, just playing.
That probably is inflation. That's why
have lived on Earth. But he's on the handful of the most important. What did he solve for? Why is he so important for how we live today? And then we want to go through Leibniz and the other 2 or 3 other major ones to get us to Santa Fe.
Well, it's a long journey.
This is the heart of what we're trying to do.
Let me take a bit of a detour just a second. What if you went to high school and the last year in your high school you took calculus? So Isaac Newton sort of invents calculus. Well, that sounds mathematicians
to torture seniors in high school before they graduate.
Yes, but obviously no. Yes, the answer is yes. Certain people could never do calculus.
Why is that? Why is calculus so? Why is that the dividing line between?
Question is though, is it in the math category or science? I don't know. Sound like it's math.
To me, people who can handle that and can go on to do certain things, and people just hit the wall, even if they know math. It seems to me that there's that calculus is the thing that changes. It bridges. That's because it's about the theory of change and the theory of how things change.
It's a great question, but in fact, what calculus does is it's somewhat philosophical. That's why mathematics is. Newton wasn't a mathematician, he was called a geometer. That's what they used to call themselves. They understood geometry and numbers. But there's an old conundrum where it says, during Pythagoras' days, Zeno's paradox it's called, where they said, well, if the wall is 2 feet away from me, and I take one step that's halfway to the wall, that'll be 1 foot away. And if I take another step that's half again, that'll be half a foot away, and then 1/4 of a foot. I could walk forever but never touch the wall. Doesn't sound realistic, doesn't make any sense in our real lives of the physical. But what Newton understood is many problems were like that. Many things approached the wall, or in calculus, approached the limit, but never really reached it. So he said, it's okay, you don't have to reach it. We can do lots of the mathematics as if it was so close, it was almost there. And we could do lots of mathematics almost being at the limit. And this is really important, Steve, for today. Because most of the science up until today was things that are starting to approach the limit. You were taught in high school that if you had 1 divided by 0, if you remember your high school algebra, you were told, what's the answer to that? Is there an answer to 1 divided by 0? No, if you were in high school, I'd say, stay away from it. It's the boogeyman. You could write it down as it's undefined. It's not able to be determined. There's a bunch of things. But in fact, 1 divided by 0 is a strange things happen. It's a world of the strange. And what I'll explain to you after is that when you get 1 divided by 0, you get into a world we don't know what happens. The answer is it's not explainable. We can call it things like undetermined. We can have a convention to say it's X, Y, or Z. But in real life, we don't know what happens when you are actually at the limit. So,
with Popeye's new $5.
I mean, you can't divide anything by nothing, and that's what 0 is. 0 is nothing. There's nothing you can do with that.
Newton thought the same concept, is that the limits were God. You got close to God, but you can never be God. He had this sort of religious interpretation.
That's facts.
Okay, I want to go back to Newton. Why is Newton such
And to be honest, you can't even get close.
a big dividing line in mankind.
He's too high up.
What is it about
Most
Newton?
high.
What is it about what he's trying to solve? What did they not know beforehand? And what? Because we live to a degree in a Newtonian universe, although I realized later subparticle atomic physics, but at least for a while it was Newtonian. So what's the dividing line? Why is he so important? Why is he an inflection point in mankind's movement from the swamp to the stars?
It's a great question. The stars was by Kepler. What Newton starts to allow us to do is to make accurate predictions. Remember that we've talked about that with money, about the things in our physical world, how cars, he didn't have cars then, how horse carriages moved, how bowling balls moved, how pool cues and pool table balls.
Had people tried to solve that before Newton? Had
Many,
people
many.
tried it? Heraclitus or Plotinus, Pythagoras, had these greats that we hear about, had they tried to solve the same problem?
Not the same problem. They try to, again, what Pythagoras does, he starts to figure out this relationships in triangles. For example, everyone knows the a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared, that Pythagorean theorem, which is basically says these shapes in a triangle, each side of the triangle has a fixed relationship with the other two sides. That's strange. He knew, again, but it was all numbers. This was a system of things in the physical world, and Pythagoras says we can start putting numbers on things that help you predict how they will behave. You can add two triangles and make a square, some different shapes. They were looking at geometric forms. Newton says, well, I want to know how planets move. I want to know how things around me move. Can we find formulas? Can I find formulas that explain what I see in the physical world, how physical things interact and how they describe one another? Again, the fact that two solid masses, for some very strange, unknown reason, unknown today, attract one another, no matter what they are. People have seen the experiment. You hang something, two little metal balls from a string, and they move towards each other. In fact, they move towards each other was very specific. So when you drop the ball to the floor of this room, Newton says, in fact, the room came up a bit to meet the ball. The room moved. It's imperceptible. You can't really perceive that motion, but they attracted each other with certain ratios. So he started to be able to measure things in the physical world. And that was great advances. It also, now you wanted to move very quickly. Unfortunately, most people, especially in the 20th century, 19th century, said, well, like Newton, let's measure everything. Let's measure people's behavior. Let's measure their psychology. Let's measure their health. You go to we can have my blood test. Let's measure everything.
I thought about that. You know what that led to? This whole race thing. That ain't real.
Measure Wall Street.
Their voting habits.
Measure. Can we put a number on how much I care for my wife? Can I put a number on how I feel? And we tried, unfortunately, we try to mathematize the finer things in life, and then recognize that there's things that unfortunately just fall outside.